panelists, except we are now joined by Ismail Coffey, who's the CTO of Celestia, and the moderator of this panel is Nima from Polychain. So Nima, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Great presentations. But before we dive into some of the more like super interesting stuff, I want to start off with sidechains and Polygon. So if we're seeing scalability happen with sidechains that are being deployed, why do we need zk-loops? Why do we not use zk-loops? And why do we do that availability?
The problem with sidechains and the Polygon bridge is that it's has a much weaker security assumption, or much weaker security model than rollups. So, for example, with ETH's assets on Polygon, to transfer them between ETH and Polygon, there's this bridge that relies on a few, basically a multi-sig wallet with a few, I don't know how many, what was that, less than 10 probably, signers, and those signers could potentially steal everyone's funds on Polygon if they were to collude. So far that hasn't happened, but I think this is a very short-term solution because we're seeing hacks on protocol all the time, and it's only a matter of time before users realize this is not a good situation, and users will want more security for their funds because in the long term it's more and more likely that the hacks will happen on the bridge because it's using a multi-sig effectively.
I fully agree. So it has two interesting sides to it. The one side is that if you have more funds in the sidechain than the stake, you actually have full incentive for the validators to exit scam, just to steal all these funds, especially if they believe that the token valuation at its peak is not going to go up. So it's just pure game theoretically, it doesn't make sense. It's not a stable mechanism. Like in blockchains, we build stuff based on incentives, based on game theory, which incentivize the right behavior. And here people behave like against their best interest, essentially. But the second aspect is that it's notoriously hard to protect hotkeys on servers. And you need them for something like a sidechain. You need the service to be online and to store these keys in the memory of the service. And you only need to hack a few of them in order to steal all these funds. And this is very hard, and it also provides plausible deniability, or like it can be an inside job, administrators of the service, or administrators of the cloud server, the cloud centers, like data centers that provide the hosting for them, can do the hack, or can neglect their duties and then so on and so forth. So it's very shaky, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's, as you both said, to just summarize, is that we need ZK rollups or optimistic rollups to provide similar scalability as like something like Polygon provides right now, but without compromising, too many compromises on security of the network.
Yeah, and also I understand to the end user they can't see security, so you can't rely solely on the security argument. There has to be other incentives to use rollups, and at Celestia we're trying to create incentives other than security, even though that's a very strong incentive. And I genuinely believe that if we make it possible to deploy rollups, or make it possible to deploy your own blockchain as easily as it is to deploy a smart contract, and then not only will that be more secure, but it will also be the preferred way because it's simply easier to create your own execution environment or to create your own chain than be bounded by the very tight constraints of the EVM.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So still on topic of security, with rollups, obviously for a better model, what failure scenarios do you see that could happen potentially?
I can start. So lots of things can go wrong. So we have to remember that this is all very new technology. So ZK rollups have been in production for a year. Optimistic rollups have not been in production ever. there will be bugs, and there will be problems and security vulnerabilities, and people will find them, and we'll go through a number of vulnerability things, and we should just expect that. So we should not rely on a single line of defense. We should be layering our defense with multiple things. We should do a lot of stuff like bug bounties, like automated bug bounties, where we deploy systems with some honeypot and let people crack it, and other things, and maybe insurance in the beginning to test the things out before they enter full scale, like before they become the alternative for world's financial system. So like the only way to ensure that something is really secure is that if it's been in production for a long period of time and it's not been hacked, then the system can be considered secure. Billions of dollars have been there for 1, 2, 3 years. That you can probably trust it. But if you make a small change in the system, you can already introduce, like, this is very interesting and intricate question, like how you deal with the upgrades, for example. But expect turbulence, and just like be ready for it. So don't put too much money in any of those systems that we need.
I would like to add just a tiny additional thing that is specific to how rollups are deployed right now. Is like if you have like a centralized sequencer, or in both cases like ZK rollups or optimistic rollups, it makes it easier, at least for short periods of time maybe, it makes it easier to censor or like halt the network. So that's why I think it's also important that the roll-up chains are actually like real peer-to-peer network and real chains, and not having only one centralized sequencer.
So like my broader philosophy on this is that I don't believe code is law on blockchains, and I believe that the purpose of blockchains is to function as a social coordination layer. So we talk a lot about layer 1, but there's also layer 0, which is social consensus. Like every time I do a hard fork in Ethereum, you have to get social consensus from layer 0. And to agree on critical rules, you have to get social consensus from layer 0. And back in 2016, when there was this massive DAO hack on Ethereum, you have to go back to social consensus, and the Ethereum community agreed to hard fork effectively and reverse the hack. And I think that's perfectly fine. And but it's not ideal if you create a smart contract in Ethereum. You cannot expect for the entire Ethereum ecosystem to hard fork just because your specific smart contract was hacked. But that's why I think with the model that we're trying to create at Celestia, where you have these app-specific rollouts, and you can hard fork, you can go back to the social consensus of that specific rollup and hard fork without affecting directly all the other rollups. And there's still the issue of how do you deal with the cross-chain bridges between rollups and other rollups. But in the case of optimistic rollup, even though optimistic rollups have a longer, like say 1 week withdrawal period, in some way that provides an advantage because it provides the ability for the social consensus to go back to the social consensus there and have some time to do some actions to agree to change the rules.
If I may add to this, I agree on the issue of layer 0 social consensus. This is indeed what blockchains are for. But it's also, it can be a dangerous road if we rely too much on social consensus, especially in the absence of stability mechanisms. Like if the system is meta-stable and it doesn't have a stable state, and then you say, oh, it's going to remain stable because like we know that we will always rely on social consensus in the end, this can be very dangerous. So like with the DAO situation, I think Ethereum would be much better off if the precedent was not set with immutability, and instead we remained, for example, like there was the soft fork, which let white hat hackers to get money back. Not all of it, but a significant portion. So Ethereum would be much better off without the fork and just going this path with the soft fork. Is my opinion. So like, we should preserve code as much as possible, but of course, like with the final, like the source of power is people, and they decide what law is that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we don't disagree there. I think the point is that just because you have this social consensus layer, the whole point of blockchains is to reduce the cost of social coordination, and that does and that is why you should make sure your protocol is incentive compatible and cryptoeconomically secure. Because the point is to reduce the chances of having like the social consensus layer, rather than relying explicitly on social consensus layer. Should go back to it in the West. Okay, our unhappy path.
Yeah, one last thing to bring up before we switch it back to data availability and rollups is a tangent to this is how on-chain option governance happens. Do you have any specific thoughts on how that can be basically influenced by, let's say, the social consensus layer?
So it depends what you mean by on-chain governance. Like, if you mean like Tesla's style on-chain governance, where like 51% of the coins can change the rules of the protocol, I think that's interesting, but that's not something I would advocate for myself, because that effectively creates like a rule, like you're saying that the rules of the chain should be decided by whoever has the most capital, whereas for me, like the point of blockchains for me is that the rules of the chain, like the point of blockchains for me is like that a 51% attack or this majority of validators in the chain should not be able to change the rules of the chain, and that's why users need to independently validate the transactions of the chain to make sure that all transactions are valid. But like because they shouldn't have to trust the block producers. But if the block producers are allowed to change the rules of the chain, it's not necessarily invalid, but it changes some of the key values that I think are important in the blockchain. So I would advocate for that kind of style of on-chain governance. I would advocate more. Like, I think it's okay to have on-chain governance for indications, but ultimately you should rely on off-chain central governance and for the actual stakeholders in the community, not necessarily weighted by wealth, but weighted by maybe informally importance in the community. Like, I think Ethereum's governance strategy is very good because of how informal and chaotic it is.
I fully agree to this, and it's. I think there's a use case for launching governance for things like DAOs, where people want to be like they want to manage some treasury, and this treasury is it can be split, so you really need a majority of those and really decide what to do with it, but like not at the metal level, like not changing the rules of the blockchain itself for the reasons which Mustafa described, and also. I think it's really beautiful what we have today with blockchains that are forkable, in that blockchains are inherently anarchic and voluntary systems. Everyone who participates in blockchain does this because they believe that it's better for them to participate. There's no coercion. If you don't like the rules of this chain, because of like so you don't like this particular branch, with this particular community, you can always fork away, introduce your new rules, or not accept the change proposed by the majority. And you just secede, and you have your own community, and then you participate there voluntarily. There's zero corruption anywhere. So in situation where, like, which Tevis has, where the majority can impose rules on everyone else, this beauty disappears. All of a sudden, it's a majority rule system, which is very different. Again, people are free to experiment with that, and they can always fork, even if the majority doesn't like it, right? So no one can prevent them. I can always fork Tezos and just build my own system which functions in a different way. So in a way, this 51% rule changing is just a statement. It's just a narrative. It's not like technically enforceable. But philosophically, I think it's better to just articulate it out clear that it's a system in which coercion is not possible.
I just want to briefly add to what Mustafa said. There's this middle ground where on-chain governance could very much look like in the Cosmos model, where you have like on-chain signaling mostly. So it's not like in Tezos where you vote and then it's like on-chain enforced or something like this. But instead, you just vote with the token. And I'm actually a big fan of this. But so for Celestia, we want the base layer to be as unopinionated and having as little execution as possible. So if we decided to go with the Ethereum model and not do any on-chain governance there, the beauty of the system is that you could actually have like a governance rollup where you can like do the signaling on there, and you could actually even tie it to the token if you wanted to. So maybe via like IBC, like inter-blockchain communication protocol, which is also used in the Cosmos world, where you could, if you wanted to, you could tie the token of the rollup to the main chain. And otherwise, you could still have like a governance rollup. So there's a lot of middle ground that could be used and needs to be explored.
Awesome. Yeah, so to switch directions a little bit, back to what Mustafa briefly mentioned with optimistic rollups having this withdrawal latency period. He framed it as a positive in the scenario he described, but typically it seems a negative because you would want to have immediate withdrawal capabilities. With bridges getting more mature and liquidity providers coming to existence, that seems to be less and less of an issue. Is that, would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I'm sure we agree with that. But what I would say is like, yes, there's this 1 week withdrawal period, which is not ideal, but there's ways to work around that, which is you can have liquidity providers. So let's say like you're on a roll-up chain and you want to transfer your assets to some other chain and spend it there. You don't necessarily have to wait a week. You can use a liquidity provider, and the liquidity provider would have an account on both roll-ups or both chains, and you send the account on. You send your funds to the liquidity provider account on the roll-up that you want to withdraw from, and then they give you assets on the roll-up or chain that you want to withdraw to. And that's perfectly secure because the liquidity provider, instead of relying or waiting for fraud proofs, they can validate the roll-up blocks for themselves. And when they validate the roll-up blocks, they can be completely sure that it's impossible to generate a fraud proof for it, and therefore they can be completely sure that it will definitely get their funds.
Yeah, so I disagree because there are many situations where it won't work smoothly. In my opinion, for example, in times of volatility where the movement is strictly or like mostly unidirectional, so everyone wants to leave this chain and go and sell some tokens, and then you quickly will drain out the capacity of the liquidity providers, and it will become just very expensive. Like you will have to pay a huge premium on your exit, like 10%, 50%, whatever. We actually saw this happening with Polygon. Certain, like on Black Thursday, there was a very significant drop in the price, and everyone rushed to exchange it, and like the Ether on Polygon was traded significantly at a discount compared to Black One. But there is also a coordination problem, and there is also a cost problem, because you need to keep this massive amount of capital idle, parked for no good reason, just like that being for keeping that capacity. How much do you keep there? 1 million? 1 billion? You know, like, and then so you need to balance it. You need to like see exactly like what's the usages, what's the daily fluctuation of this exit volume, and so on. I think it's going to be really hard, and like we'll just create a lot of cost. It will all be transformed into costs for the end users.
Yeah, exactly, trade-offs. But the scenario described is the same scenario that is a scenario where users cannot withdraw their funds quickly enough. But the same scenario can also happen in Ziggy Quarter, for example, in the case of a malicious data availability committee, which refuses to transfer the funds.
Yeah, but not with Ziggy Rollup. So Ziggy Quarter has its own security parameter. Like if we compare two rollups, we should compare Ziggy Rollup to Optimistic Rollup. Not Optimistic Rollup to Ziggy Quarter. We should compare them.
Sure, and there's definitely trade-offs. So I'm not going to claim like I believe in both Ziggy and Optimistic rollups. There's trade-offs between both. Like I'm not optimistic rollup maximalist or anything like that. But I will also say that in the Celestia model, because in Ethereum rollups, the fault proofs are posted on chain, onto the Ethereum chain. But in the Celestia model, we envision a model where you can have sovereign rollups that are sort of like chains in their own right. And so the fault proofs don't need to be posted on chain, but can be distributed within the peer-to-peer network of that rollup subnetwork. And because you distribute the fault proofs in this peer-to-peer network, you can have a much lower challenge period within that network, because there's a much lower network synchrony delay to distribute a fault proof within a peer-to-peer network than there is to actually post it on chain and wait for a miner to accept that. So that you can reduce the challenge period like 10 minutes, for example. However, you still have the challenge period with cross-chain bridges. Like if you actually transfer your rollup from the rollup to another different chain, you still have this 1 week withdrawal period. So there's definitely trade-offs.
Actually, I have a question for you. When you use IBC, like for like if you submit the fraud proof, including let's say the fraud proof is gossiped in the peer-to-peer network of the one chain, and you want to notify the other chain, can you submit it like via IBC, or it's not doesn't help because it's itself a bridge?
What is the question about?
So if you can submit the fraud proof that is gossip in the peer-to-peer layer of one chain, if you can submit it via IBC to the other chain, leverage IBC to submit the fraud proof somewhere that is available to you, invisible, instead of waiting.
But you still have this issue where you have to wait for the rollup to be included in the block, right? And it's waiting for it. It's the fact that you have to wait for it to be included for the block that you cannot assume that the challenge period will be too low, because you don't know how much on-chain capacity there is. Like maybe the chain is really busy, and maybe miners in that chain are a bit malicious and do something like that. And so you can make less assumptions. You can easily make more assumptions about a peer-to-peer network that you control than the chain.
Yeah, so the follow-up question I want to ask that is relevant to withdrawals or liquidity providers between rollups. Are there any specific advantages that ZK rollups have, or we're optimistic or vice versa, that deal specifically with non-fungible assets? Because we're seeing NFTs becoming more popular through in-game assets or otherwise.
Pass on this one, we don't have any NFTs.
Okay. Well, I full disclosure, I'm a ZK roll maximalist, so I'm very ZK rolls better. And eventually will prevail on more blockchains because of the properties they have. And one obvious advantage, which is insurmountable for optimistic rollups, is that the exit for NFTs from L2 to L1 cannot be accelerated in optimistic rollups, and in ZK rollups it's natively very fast, just a few minutes, which takes to generate the proof. Apart from that, I think that with NFTs are inherently a very popular movement, and you're going to have a lot of NFTs. Like it's something that caters very much to the mass audience, and you're going to have a lot of NFTs. Only a fraction of them is going to be variable. Most of them are not going to be variable. So you rollups have a cost because they provide this high level of security. So they're very well suited for DeFi, for high value transactions, but not so much for these micro transactions. So my feeling is that NFTs are going to be very popular on something like a ZK Porter or sidechains. But with ZK Porter, it's great because you can easily transfer them from the ZK Porter account to the ZK Rollup account once you get some really valuable NFT. Because all of a sudden it's very popular. And with art, you never know. It can happen overnight.
I agree. You can use NFTs for both optimistic and ZK rollups. like it probably doesn't make sense to do it on ZK rollups because it's not a complicated application. It's just like a transfer of assets, and ZK rollups right now are well suited towards like simple transfer of assets. They're not very well suited right now to like more complicated like applications that have more complicated logic. Long term, that might be solved. I know some people are trying to work on like more general like purpose, having general purpose computation in terms of ZK rollups. But it's not clear to me like what time I'm looking at and how practical it will be in the future.
I have a quick question. You mentioned that the ZK porter and the ZK rollup accounts, they are interoperable. Is that, when you say they're interoperable, do you mean exactly what you just said, that you can easily like transfer from one account to the other? And so it's always an either or?
So you just, like within the system, they are indistinguishable essentially. The only difference is like outside on the validator level, who will publish or not publish the data availability, which is externally observable by the users. But inside the system, there is no distinction. You just have one address, the other address, some contracts there, some of the balances there. So like it's seamless, just like Laravel.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So, in a role-centric world, I know that you said you think that there's going to be one instance of ZK Sync, but in the Celestia world, there's going to be multiple rollups, right? So we can consider both scenarios. In a scenario where there are multiple rollups, how do you envision multiple apps being on one rollup or one rollup specific, or one app specific chain affecting immediate interoperability?
Yes, I think your argument is that Celestia we have multiple rollups, both for scalability reasons and for flexibility reasons. The scalability reasons because you don't want to it's not scalable to have like a massive like one rollup doing all execution because you need to have an aggregator with a lot of resources to produce that chain, and also you have to have flow-proof generators that have a lot of resources. In ZK rollup, you have the same issue because you still need the ZK prover to process all those transactions, but you don't have the verification issue because it's constant verification cost. And that's the first reason. And then the second reason is flexibility. We want people to have flexibility of creating their own, like creating different execution environments. Like you don't want to have like one roll up, that's just EVM roll up. I mean, you could, like someone can create it, someone can definitely create it on Celestia. But like we don't tie to that model. We want to be able to have people create their own execution environments to be able to innovate in different ways. But I'll let you think about my understanding is like with ZK Sync, it's like you're only targeting, if you're only targeting one application, which is payments, there's not much need to have flexibility in different execution environments because there's only one way to do payments. There's not that much flexibility. If the application is an asset transfer, there's not much need to have different execution environments for that.
Yeah, this is true, but then you normally don't just want to do transfers. You want to do transfers within. You want to remain within the ecosystem. So think from the user perspective. You have one wallet, you have some balance in it. Sometimes you want to send a transaction to send some money to a friend or pay for something online. But then you also want to participate in DeFi from the same account. You want to.
Yeah, but like why? It's like why you want to participate in DeFi? Like, are you saying like you should like embed a bunch of DeFi protocols into your ZK rollup?
Well, we're going to build a generic rollup where you can deploy anything, right?
So that people can deploy smart contracts or like it's custom.
Yeah, so people can deploy smart contracts, of course. Like any EVM smart contracts, they can transfer things, but they can also invoke contracts and they can program logic in contracts. And the more interesting question is like, do we want to experiment with the different execution environments, EVM or non-EVM compatible, And this is a really big question, and it's not the best language, it's not the best API, but it got sticky. It's actually terrible in many ways, but it got sticky, and now it's the standard. And there is no question. Like no one is coming with browsers that support alternative APIs, and very much it supports JavaScript and DOM and standard HTML things, right? So I'm afraid we're at this point with EVM. At least for the observable future, it will be this. Like there is no like EVM compatibility will be this lingua franca of blockchains. That's why we're on it.
I very strongly believe that there's like the necessity to like innovate and experiment with different things, especially like MVV, for instance, mentioned. You cannot come up with a perfect solution in all cases, and it's the beauty like in Celestia is that you can like have literally have different roll-ups that deal differently with this. And also, you mentioned JavaScript is a very good analogy, but like, I'm very happy that although JavaScript may be like in the browser the default, okay, there's like a bunch of other languages that we as developers can use, and I'm very happy about this fact. And I think also we already live in a world where people build like in different languages, not only using the EVM, and also in using the optimistic roller paradigm, you can still have an EVM-compatible execution environment on top of, for instance, Celestia. And so there's no limit. Like it's why would we limit ourselves to just JavaScript in quotes? Like even if also I think I still believe it's quite early in the logic space, and also the innovation circles are like the innovation happens much faster than in the browser world. So even if JavaScript in quotes might be the standard now, like 6 years from now, the world will be completely different, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so it's also not just about language; it's also about resource pricing. So it's like with JavaScript, I think it's a bit different because like people have created all kinds of things to make JavaScript more palatable. Like jQuery and like languages that compile. You can compile C to JavaScript. Like there's all these like stuff on top of it, like the JS and the CoffeeScript to make it more palatable. But that works in JavaScript case because JavaScript runs locally on people. JavaScript doesn't run on a global shared machine, so you can do all these like abstractions that can be done on local machines or within the browser. But it's much more difficult to do that on a world computer like Ethereum. Like I implemented like elliptic curve crypto libraries with these. Like the gas cost is 2 billion gas, for example, and there's no way for me to optimize that, like without convincing like the Ethereum community to do a hard fork to introduce a new opcode. So it's much harder. There's a lot of like stuff you have to do to introduce. If you want to optimize it, like people have optimized JavaScript a lot on the browser level, but when you want to do that on Ethereum, with specific things that are more expensive, if you implement it on Ethereum, you have to do hard forks to introduce new opcodes to do that. Just to make it just to make it performant.
Cool. I'm going to ask one last question before we open up the audience, which is, what is your long-term vision for the crypto ecosystem as a whole, and how do you envision Celestia, Sync, playing into that, specifically with respect to privacy, transparency, and user adoption? I'll start with you guys.
Sure. So, ZK-Sync is a mission-driven project. The mission is to bring crypto to the hands of everyone in the world. It's just a question of how. It's not a question of whether or not it will happen. It will happen. It's like we have to figure out how to do it exactly. So we will start with what we have now. It will bring us to some multiple of the users potentially possible on Ethereum today. So it will probably bring us to like millions, like hundreds of millions of users. Not billions yet, but eventually we'll have to get to billions. So can see a world where this is not happening for a variety of reasons. From the social perspective, there's a huge demand for this. There's a demand. This is a problem many people have and don't know they have it. And there will be more events in the traditional finance world that will push people towards this development and will make them embrace this technologies more. And also the young generation, like the Gen Zers, are just very token and crypto native. They're not just internet native; they are already token native. Right? Generational shift from now, the majority of people in the world will be just natively exposed to that. So it's just inevitable.
Yeah, so I think our long-term vision is that we see a potential world where every community, from small communities like gaming, some private gaming center or Minecraft, to large-scale communities like governments, they will all potentially have their own kind of value system or decentralized application on a chain to either track for either governance purposes or value transfer purposes or just to record information to make it more transparent. I see a potential world where every community has its own kind of state on some kind of chain or on the internet to keep track of either value or governance. And it's just going to be impossible to have every community having a shared state on a shared execution environment. But if you make it possible for communities to easily deploy their own software chains within seconds, then I think if you make it that frictionless, it will eventually happen. The only kind of question there is, from a technical perspective, is how do you make those different chains associated communities interoperable and composable? Because right now, if you create a smart contract in Ethereum, you can easily call all smart contracts in Ethereum and do stuff and communicate with all smart contracts. But in a world where everything is going to roll up, interoperability and composability between those roll-ups and communities becomes a little bit more trickier. And I think but unfortunately, I think we have to deal with that because that's what's already happening today is, for the past 10 years, blockchain developers have basically gotten a free lunch with composability. They haven't had to think about composability of it. It's just to put a smart contract in Ethereum and just call all the smart contracts very easily. But even with Ethereum in the future, with Ethereum 2.0, that's no longer going to be the case. You have to have this roll-up centric roadmap where people are expected to create their own roll-up for their applications. And so you just have to accept the fact that developers will have to think more carefully or bake in interoperability explicitly into their applications. And technologies like Cosmos and IBC will be very important for that, to help with that.
Yeah, I'm very much aligned with what Mustafa's vision is. I'm just adding. I just want to add that I think it's not mass adoption and these global communities and that interoperate with each other is not just something we want to push or is nice to have from a technical perspective or is because people are already crypto native or whatever. But I believe that eventually some form of global coordination across communities is also a necessity for us as a global society.
All right, thanks for your answers, and we can open to the floor for any questions if you have any.
Hello. That's the question to Alex. I should have answered it before, but it's related to ZK Sync and ZK Porter. So do ZK Sync and ZK Porter support inter-contract communication on EVM? So can you, using ZK Porter and ZK Sync, share state between contracts on EVM?
Inside ZK Sync?
No, using ZK Sync, using those rollups.
So, I don't understand.
So like you said that ZK Sync and ZK Porter is EVM compatible ZK rollup. So like, and it runs EVM at some point and posts the results on chain, like on layer 1. So is it possible to do like rollup level inter-contract? Like, so you like deploy one contract and other contract, and can they interact with each other
Inside ZK Sync.
inside the sync?
Well, this is a great question. Thank you so much for it. That means like I still didn't do a good job in explaining that in the presentation. Like I was doing my best, but like I need to find a good wording. So like, this is what we meant when we say they are seamlessly interoperable and composable. So like essentially, like everything is inside ZK Sync. You can think of it as a model of Ethereum. So the answer is clear: yes. You can deploy multiple contracts. They can call each other. These calls can be atomic. They will execute, share the state, access each other's variables, do delegate call, do normal call, and everything works just exactly the same as layer 1. Does this answer the question? Yeah. So we need to
there is
clearly how to frame it.
there is no limitation to EVM at all.
Mm.
Like if you run on there is no contract limitation on the rollup level.
Well, there will be some limitations, like you probably cannot do like 1 million calls in the same block. Like there will be some soft limitations based on, or hard limitations that will have very high degree of like how deep is your recursion stack can be, how many contracts can be how many calls can there be in a single transaction, in a block, and so on. Like there will be like some technical nature of the proof generation. Although we have recursive proof generation, so we theoretically can go like unlimited. We just but there will be some nuances there. But from practical standpoint, it won't affect like most people. So like the limits are very high. So you can do that.
Thanks.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. Like, what if you hit capacity in that EVM and you deploy another instance of that rollup? How are they interoperable?
Yeah, because there's like hardware limits, right, to how much a single ZK proof can verify on a single hardware.
Yeah, there is no limit how much a single ZK can verify because it's like perfectly recursive. So we put as many, like we have mini blocks, and we can chain as many of them in a single big roll block as we need. So there is no limit there. You don't need to split up one machines. We do it all in parallel. Like, we just like have a big, powerful sequential processor which takes transactions and then puts them in the block, and then the block, like this big roll block, can be as long as you need.
I mean, there's a limit to how what the most powerful processor is. Like, let's say you get a core i9 or whatever. There's still a limit to how much transaction per second. So I guess the question is like, can you parallelize the proving of a screw up into multiple like cores?
Sure. So this is a limitation all EVM compatible systems share, because EVM is inherently sequential, and there have been proposals by Vitalik Buterin, for example, to add an overlay on top of EVM transactions to make parallel transaction processing possible, where you specify in some non-Turing complete language which accounts are going to be touched by this transaction. Then you can build a tree of dependencies, and then you can execute the subpaths in this tree in parallel. And this can be added, and this will probably happen in the future. Like this is a pretty far future, because for now, the bottleneck of EVM compatible chains, like essentially Geth and everything which is based on Geth, is not the CPU, it's not the bandwidth, it's the random storage access. And this can be easily solved, like this can be easily boosted manifold if you just store all of your storage in the RAM, in memory. You disagree? But what this will give you is requirements for running the processor node will be very high, which is okay for ZK rollups. which is not okay for optimistic rollups. So for ZK rollups, it's perfectly fine. Yes, we have high requirements for running a node. You have to run it on a very powerful machine with lots of CPUs and lots of memories. And you cannot do anything wrong anyway, because you will produce the proof, and you will share this proof with everyone, like it will be verified by Ethereum. But I agree, this won't work for optimistic rollups, because everyone should be able to run a full node on their consumer hardware, and then you cannot have this limitation.
So there's the idea to have multiple recursive ZK proofs inside a single kind of ZK rollup. You have multiple recursive ZK rollups inside a multiple ZK rollup. You have multiple recursive rollups in a single rollup, and that allows you to parallelize the execution of that rollup, assuming that EVM can be parallelized.
You could do that if you wanted. You could build a hierarchy of chains where you, like essentially shards, where you do execution in each of the shard and then you aggregate them recursively. This is possible. We use craft CD in the original ZK portal post. And this will probably indeed happen. So it's some of the application-specific, community-specific systems will be like this. Like games, they will have their own shard, and the most transactions happens within the shard. They only need to propagate up to the upper levels, to the ZK rollup itself when you want to move funds out or to the chart. But most things happen inside it. No one else will need to know except for the proof of the block. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, on ZK Sync, relative to Ethereum, could the validator or the aggregator do MEV worse or less? More MEV or less MEV?
So the all rollups are like pretty equal in this regard. If you don't address the problem specifically, then you're down to your sequencer. Like whatever MEV minor extraction the sequencer allows, that's what you have. If you have a centralized sequencer, they can do whatever they want. You can form blocks in any way, and you can put transactions for whatever they want. It's a question how you deal with this. If you have a decentralized sequencer, it's a question of how you structure it. Right? So and generally, what's your philosophical position on MEV? So for ZK Sync, I can say that we believe that MEV is evil because it puts a certain group of users in a much more privileged position than everyone else. And this is what blockchains are against. Right? So you want to have equal rules. So you mentioned Ethereum miners. The mining pool operator has a lot more power than the whoever provides the mining shares. Like they can do it in a secretive manner so that no one notices immediately, and they get all the profit to themselves. Right? And they don't share it with the mining hash, like with the actual miners. And the miners cannot hold them accountable, unlike just distributing rewards. So, for ZK Sync, as long as there is a single sequencer which is centralized, the operator just guarantees that there will be no MEV. Like transactions are going to be served on first come, first served order. With a decentralized sequencer, we'll have small, low latency blocks within a second. So this will lower the window of opportunity to reorder transactions because you need to provide the confirmation as soon as possible. And in the long run, we'll have something like time-locked encryption to prevent censorship and MEV altogether fundamentally. Because the miners won't even know what they're signing, what's going on the block until it's finalized. What's your?
No, I was wondering how you're doing your time, and another question.
Yeah, we just have one more question left.
I actually have a question.
No, okay.
Can we do two questions, please?
Sure. I'll make it quick,
Yes.
I promise.
I'll try to. I have a question. You mentioned automated bug bounty, what you're referring to, and the second question, what's your plan with honeypots? Like first question is about what do you mean by automatic bug bounty? And second question, you mentioned about the plan with honeypots. What are you going to do?
It's the same thing. So like automated bug bounty is just a convert which has some money in it, and if you crack it, you get it. So like this is, or you could do like more stuff. Like if you find a vulnerability in this convert, and you can prove that there's a vulnerability in some way. Like for example, you can destroy it, not just steal the funds from it. But if you have a separate convert which points to this one, and it will release the bounty to whoever can prove that they destroyed this convert, they executed the transaction that led to destruction. This would be something like this. Like this will provide you more certain. Like for you as an exploiter or white hat hacker who like hacks around, it will be very guaranteed rather than relying on reputation and trust in project owners who might or might not give you the bounty. So that's what they call honeypots.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll move quickly. It's mostly to do with ZK Sync, but I guess also like philosophically between what rollups were and sort of where they're going. There seems to be a lack of discernibility in something that ZK Sync does, in that it provides. You can kind of say group it as arbitrary recursion, or you could say it's well, you have this validation of state transitions for any given proof in ZK EVM compatible, versus like you can almost say earlier stuff like ZK money being kind of limited in what they can do. And I think a lot of people mismatch between normal recursion or normal rollups and then arbitrary recursion first, whether state transitions or Cairo do it with the defining the CPU in the circuit. Do you think more discernible language ought to be provided so people kind of know where it was and then what the future may be?
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
So do you think more discernible language must be given so people understand the difference between like validating a state transition for any rolled up proof or any prejudice going in what ZK Sync 2.0 does or in what Cairo does versus non-ZK EVM, in this case compatible rollups like previous things, like ZK money and stuff?
So you're just saying like whether we should provide a more strict, rigorous language to distinguish between different types of
I guess recursion methods on projects, because people seem to batch together companies like Loopring and Mina and Aztec with sort of the types of things going on now, and they are quite different in what they plan to and what they provide. I mean, of course, like the inner workings are different, like Starkware is completely different, but what they actually plan on doing and what they provide really is quite different, and they seem to be brought together or stuck together, and that doesn't seem to mold quite well.
Oh, I see. So, well, you have a hierarchy of classification of systems, right? So you have L2s and non-L2s, and L2s are subsequently categorized as like rollups and non-rollups, and then rollups can be ZK and optimistic, and ZK rollups can be based on Starks, and Starks can be with transit setup and not. So, like, if you want to dig deeper, you need to understand this. Like, it won't help to just like use more specific language. You really need to have these models in your head or before your eyes. And like, there are these classifications and these graphs which like categorize systems. Like what is Validium, what is rollup, what is ZK Porter to it. So I think like not many people will understand, and those who will understand, they actually have to dive deeper and go into nuances.
All right, let's have one last round of applause for all our panelists. Cool, all right, that's the end of the event. I want to thank Matter Labs and Polychain, and of course Celestia for hosting, and of course Live99. And you guys should all stick around for the pizza and I think there's beers and drinks outside. So let's all talk crypto. Thanks again for coming.